on sexuality, and this video will contain much explicit content, which is why the description says, or the title says, for adults. And so evolutionarily speaking, the human has a limbic system, and that limbic system is a more primitive part of the brain that is always telling the prefrontal cortex that it needs to duplicate itself. You need to replicate. And so the messages that the limbic system tells the cortex, it says, to satisfy me, you need to have sex. And so, as humans got smarter, we figured out ways that we could repeatedly satisfy that limbic system circuit without the burden of an unmanageable amount of offspring. And so basically, contraceptive methods such as condoms, tube tying, pills, all enable the limbic system to be satisfied without the burden of the offspring. And so viewing sex ultimately from a philosophical point of view, sex in the absence of impregnation and procreation is pretty much pointless. Why? It's as pointless as eating chocolate cake or having dairy like cheese when your body has stopped growing and you no longer need the dairy as a growth food. And some people who continue to have too much dairy upon cessation of growing develop skin problems because dairy is a food that is associated with growing. And so once the body has stopped growing, it no longer really needs dairy once you're a fully grown adult. But still everything has cheese. Keep on eating the cheese. And so it's kind of ultimately as well, because the human system is ultimately kind of evil. People find ways to profit off other people's brains. And so in the modern time, in the state of Nevada in the United States, prostitution is legal. And so men can pay for sex with very attractive women, right? And women will withhold their sexuality from men such that only the rich guys can have sex with them. And so what happens is that basically the supposedly evil women know that men desire sex naturally, withhold their sexuality from men unless the man has money. And so Mia Malkova, who is like a female porn star, at one point was making millions in a year and had a whole castle in which she filmed flicks and so on. And so why has male consciousness elevated Mia Malkova to that level to make millions of dollars a year and literally have a castle to film pornographic videos? Because Mia Malkova's structure is the following. She screams, "I have high estradiol." Estradiol indicates fertility. And so some people may not understand this, but certain visual cues in a female indicate that she's fertile or has high estradiol. One of those is larger breasts. And so, although larger breasts are not correlated with increased milk supply, they indicate higher estradiol hormone. And then you have waist. Yeah. You have waist to hip ratio. And so if the ratio of a female's waist to her hip is 0.7, then that is aesthetically ideal. And so that good waist to hip ratio, ultimately wide hips, also correlated with larger backside. And so Mia Malkova sort of has all the signs of high estradiol, but further also combines that with facial aesthetic features. And I suppose also there are men who like blondes, hence the term blonde bombshell, right? And so me, with my willpower, right, I've been largely cold turkey on pornographic material for like over 6 years, because I realized that as a man, this actually just weakens your brain by giving it too much reward for too little effort. In other words, the effort is simply, have a computer, maintain an internet connection, then you can see infinite females for very low cost or free, right? And so for the effort required, the reward is high, right? The effort required is barely anything, then the reward is high. What that does to it is it weakens you. And so anyway, a bunch of male consciousness, a sea of male consciousness elevated Mia Malkova to the level where she was making millions a year and had a castle to film her videos, literally, and a really expensive BMW. And so you could call that evil, right? And so is Mia Malkova kind of like an evil witch queen that's like getting rich off of all of these beta males that are giving her that much attention? Yes. Is that whole, approach to life kind of evil? Yes. And then as a female, pornographic actress, obviously this involves intercourse with multiple men that you make scenes with, rather than being committed to any, monogamous relationship. And so yes, you could say that this is wholly evil. It is messed up, sure. And it's the way in which evolution led to the female to sort of prey on the male sexually, to get rich. And so anyway, so anyway, so yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. More information. yeah, more information. Um, with reference to porn, there's obviously the popular theme of interracial, a black male, a white female, and so I'll wax on why the average size of African men is larger than the other races on average. Um, and so some girls think it's melanin, um, but it's not. So why is it not melanin? The following fact: Indian men have high melanin, but the average bone pressed erect length in India is 5.1 inches, and that is erect. Whereas in Sudan, Africa, the bone pressed erect length is the largest in the world on average, and so the average there is about 7.1 on average. And then the average in the US is between 5.1 and 5.6 erect, right? And so if it were melanin, then the Indians would be, similar to the Africans. But it is not melanin. Melanin was a mutation. And so evolution works the following way. If a mutation is successful for the environment, it is selected for sexually as a strong trait. And then that trait is then propagated to the future generations. And so in regions of the planet that are near the equator, that receive very, 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 very high percentage or significant amount of solar radiation, it is such that increased melanin reduces the likelihood of such radiation leading to skin cancer. And so India is proximate to the equator, and so is Africa, sections of Africa. And so both the Africans and the Indians both the Africans and the Indians have melanin. However, the reason why the average BPL in Africa is, especially Sudan, is higher than in India is because the average temperature in Sudan is much hotter than in India. And so the actual causative thing in this whole thing is not melanin concentration or amount of melanin. It is actually the temperature. And so if a group of humans evolves in a place that is generally hot, the body's doing the following form of homeostasis. I need to always have the blood at the externals of my skin and at my extremities, such that the heat contained within the blood can be maximally lost to the environment at the fastest rate. And so ultimately, the penis is an extremity, just like toes and fingers and, of course, the surface of your skin. And so a group of humans evolving in a hot climate has more blood flow to their dicks than a group of humans evolving in a temperate climate. And so over time, that leads to more nutrition, more blood flow to your dick if you evolve in a hotter region as opposed to a colder region. Over time, naturally, that leads to a larger on average size. And so the causative thing is not melanin, itself, but the temperature. Now, hotter temperatures are associated with being nearer to the equator and therefore experiencing more harsh radiation, right? But the melanin is correlatory with the size, not the causative thing. The causative thing is the temperature. If it was the melanin, the Indians would be the same as the Africans. So, anyway. Yeah. Anyway. So anyway. What is true for me is that I am a hybrid between black and white. And so my genetic makeup is some percentage African, some percentage Irish, some percentage Spanish. And so in the United States, I've been to a pub and a fellow has said, "Hey, you're black." I've been to a tavern and a girl has said, "Hey, it is Tyrone the Science Guy," which is the name she came up with as the black analog to Bill Nye. Right? And so these people are seeing that certain features that I exhibit indicate some percentage of African genetics, and they'd be correct. And so the hair on top of my head and the hair on my beard is somewhat curly. My nose is somewhat thick. My lips are somewhat thick. My complexion is, for the most part, a kind of golden brown. And so the hybrid that is me, that is both black and white, is in America referred to as a light skin. Right? And so, interestingly or ironically, my percentage of African genetics does, possibly impact how endowed I am. And so I'll say the following true things. I'm a 6'4", mixed, both black and white, male. And when I'm maximally aroused, my unexaggerated bone-pressed erect length actually is approximately 9 inches, at least. So I can safely say 9, right? Unaroused, I'm between 5 and 6 inches. If I subject myself to an extremely cold shower while being unaroused because of homeostasis, I could literally shrink to 4 inches. Anyway, and so anyway, so so basically, the Gaussian, the normal distribution of bone-pressed erect lengths in the United States has a mean somewhere between 5.1 and 5.6 inches. And so And so 9 BPEL, which is what I get up to, is above the 99.99th percentile, meaning it's all the way at the right end of the bell curve. And I believe it is possibly rarer than 1 in 1,000 in the US, right? Now at the other end of that Gaussian, there exist 3-inch when erect micropenises, where the BPEL is 3 inches. Now I'm not sure what kind of God allows me to get up to at least 9 BPEL unexaggerated, and then there to also exist 3-inch when erect micropenises, because this means that there are consciousnesses that are 1/3 of my size, which is nuts, but it's true. So anyway, anyway, yeah. Yeah. So now I'll talk about something else, which is so I was having a conversation with a 35-year-old 5'1" stripper, and she said that post childbirth her vagina never reverted to being tight, and so now she prefers longer and thicker than pre-childbirth. And I found that interesting because the whole concept of how after having a child a woman can become a size queen because they are looser post childbirth, I found that to be very interesting. I'd never really thought about that until this person told me, right? And so post childbirth, this person said she prefers longer and thicker. I was like, okay, now I know that, right? And so yeah. And so anyway, so now I'll wax on a few of some of the things I find dystopian or not ideal about the nature of things, which is exaggeration. And so basically, in the whole pornographic scene, there's this fellow going by the name of Fred Dingo, and then formerly his name was Mandingo, right? And he is a 5'7", fully black man, right? And there was a video in which he is in it, and the caption is "A woman impaled by 14-inch black cock." Now, Now, as you recall, I said earlier in this video that I get up to, formally, at least unexaggerated 9 inches bone press direct length, right? And so why is this caption saying that Mandingo is 14 inches? Well, if you did a query, if you ask Grok to analyze, given frame analysis of different scenes and Reddit conversations doing frame analysis and BPEL estimation, what is the unexaggerated BPEL of Fred? It would say about 9, right? And so with camera tricks, with extremely petite women, with camera angles, then I say 14 inches. And so I what I'm finding is that an unexaggerated 9-inch BPEL is then like 13 or 14 inches in exaggerated porn land. And so Mandingo is not the only case where this occurs. And so we'll get to yeah. And so we'll get to Julio Gomez, right? And so in a scene that Julio Gomez did with Bella Rossi, it said Bella Rossi takes 15 inches of black meat. And then in the more modern times, like in a scene that he did with Abby Love, you know, he went by 14 inches, right? However, if you genuinely went on the Grok website and said, given Reddit analysis in terms of frame analysis from viewers, what is the true unexaggerated BPEL of Julio Gomez? Grok would say, and I've done this already, 9.5 BPEL, right? And so, for the most part, throughout Julio's scenes, like assessing the frames of the scenes, he's for the most part 9.5 BPEL, right? But then he'll say he's 14 inches, right? Now keep in mind that earlier in this video, again, I said I was unexaggerated 9 BPEL and 6'4" and brown, right? So I'm not too far off Julio, even if that may be hard to believe. But what made Julio so special wasn't exactly how long he was, it was his thickness. And so it was thought that the circumference around the shaft of his dick was between like 7 to 8 inches circumference, right? And so basically, why was this the case? And so Julio Gomez would make even Fred appear thin, right? And so if you research why was this the case, the common answer is that he has sickle cell anemia. And then that caused priapism. And priapism is a condition in which there are blood traps and fibrosis and scarring causing a swollen appearance. And so there's literally like blood leakage, fibrosis, and scarring causing his swollen appearance because of sickle cell anemia related priapism. The downsides of that medical condition are erectile dysfunction and at times painful erections. And so if you're wondering how is that kind of thickness natural, it seems to have been because he was sick. He had that condition. And it was actually blood traps and blood leakage and scarring and fibrosis causing that, right? Now, while this could be correct, these actors also do intentional enhancement techniques such as ligament surgery, use of injections, and further use of a vacuum pump, which increases the amount of blood their dick engorges with, which enhances length and thickness. And so pretty much all the popular pornographic actors, the males, they will pump before scenes with a vacuum pump, right? And so while Julio's thickness is attributed to anemia and priapism, there was also, of course, enhancement techniques that he did. So anyway, so ultimately Julio was pretty much like 9.5 by like 7.5, meaning his unexaggerated BPEL was like 9.5, and then the circumference around the shaft of his dick was like 7.5, right? And then in my case, my unexaggerated BPL is 9. However, the only place where I get to 7.5 girth circumference is around the head of my dick. And so you could say in terms of raw numbers, Julio was 9.5 by 7.5, and I am 9 by 7.5, but Julio had 7.5 along his whole shaft, whereas I only get to 7.5 at the head of my dick. So, but Julio was so thick that he would make even Mandingo appear thin. So anyway, and so the thing about the universe that I'm realizing is that it has this duality to it. Anything that could be called a blessing also has this inverse curse attribute. And so, although Julio's thickness made him special, it was in part due to sickle cell anemia and priapism, which has downsides of at times erectile dysfunction and painful erections. Right? And he possibly also could have used enhancement techniques to get that appearance. Right? And further, I've understood that Julio followed a 42-year-old woman into an elevator and choked her and committed assault, and that he was incarcerated in 2021, and he got at least 5 years. And if this is correct, it's not yet 2026, and so he's still in jail, and his career is pretty much over. Right? And so there's a song called Way Down We Go, which was on a FIFA soccer simulation video game I used to play. And the introduction goes something like, oh, Father, tell me, do we get what we deserve? Oh, do we get what we deserve? And way down we go. That kind of thing. And so that kind of, resonates with me and the story of Julio. Because he also would do things that were kind of, just, completely, horrible. And so one of the posts on his X profile, which is still up, post him going to jail, was with a caption something like, "White guys just can't compete," with a picture of his dick, which is, as I've said, usually about 9.5 BPEL unexaggerated, and then one of those 3-inch when erect white micropenises that exist. Right? And so Julio, in that post, was selecting for evidence to support his case, right? For reference, Danny D is a white British porn star, and Danny D's size is similar to Julio's, although obviously not quite as thick, because Julio was in a different league with respect to thickness. Right? And so, anyway, so anyway, so anyway, so anyway, so now that I've touched on all that, well, let's see what I've got now. Yeah. Yeah. Also, some of the pictures of Julio utilize, edited pictures that enhance his size, like so even some of the pictures on his X profile are visibly edited. So, and like enhanced. So, Uh, anyway, so anyway, yeah, huh. So now I'll analyze some other things, and so on the topic of exaggerations. Um, I think Jason Love, who's 6'5" and quite muscular, had like a self-made claim that he was 10 inches. But again, Grok, you like ask it, analyze all the Reddit conversations doing frame analysis of an unexaggerated BPEL for Jason Love, and it will converge on somewhere between 7.5 and 8 inches BPEL. Now, I said I get up to 9, and so yes, although Jason Love is, about my height and fully black and more muscular than I am, I actually have something like at least an inch on Jason Love, which is interesting. But anyway, um, but anyway, uh, anyway, and then of course there's this new fellow called Hollywood Cash, and this fellow's estimated BPL is like 8 inches, and if you look at any scenes with him, he's quite thin, and so Hollywood Cash is 8 BPL and thin, whereas I'm 9 and thicker. And so Julio would make Hollywood Cash look extremely thin, right? Even though Hollywood Cash is fully black, he's thin. So anyway, and then Anton Harden is 5'7" and might have an exaggerated size of like 11 inches, but you ask Grok to do a frame analysis, or given all the Reddit frame analysis of BPL estimation unexaggerated, it will converge on 8.5 for Anton. And so Anton is fully black and 5'7" and 8.5, and then I'm 6'4" and mixed with black and white, and then I get up to like 9 at least. So the other concept is that even if you are endowed, if you are tall, you will look smaller in comparison to your body. And so you look at a full body standing picture of Jason Love, at between 7.5 and 8, and he's 6'5" and quite muscular. He looks small for his body. And then you compare that with 5'7", 8.5 Anton. Anton looks much bigger, but he's only like maybe 1 inch bigger. So, anyway, so anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. Anyway, so I'm 24 years of age. I'll soon be 25. And so in this year of my life, I've had a sexual partner that was actually 11 years older than me. And so you're like, what? You're a 24-year-old and you've had a sexual partner that's 35? Well, yes. And so how that happened was I won't get into how that happened, but yes. And so I've had intercourse with this person 3 times, right? And so it'd be like, is an 11-year age difference, with the woman being older than the man, like, too much? And I'd say it's not too much, because if you look at Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who was a soccer player, or internationally a football player, quite a character. Ibrahimovic's wife, Helena, or however you pronounce it, Helena, if I believe. Helena, so on. Ibrahimovic's wife is 11 years older than Ibra, right? And so I found that very funny, right? Especially in the context of, in the short section on this channel, there's a video where I'm doing soccer tricks that has gotten 15 likes and then over 4,000 views. And it's me doing soccer tricks, similar to some stuff that Ibrahimovic has done in freestyle, consisting of like rainbow flick, around the world, stall on chest, so on. And so I found that correlatory, I found that ironically correlatory with the fact that Ibrahimovic's wife is 11 years older than him, and then my partner is 11 years older than me. But anyway, I'm not sure that any of these coincidences necessarily mean anything. But so anyway, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, and so the first time I had intercourse with this older woman, after completion, I said, well, how many times did you reach orgasm? And her response was, and I quote, I don't know, like 4 times. And my legs were shaking. And so, I was like, okay, well, so this was only my second ever time having intercourse. And it's like, well, okay. I suppose that's good, you know. Anyway, um, so so anyway, um, yeah. So yeah. Um, but going back to the concept of anything that could be called a blessing also has its curse attribute. Um, which is uh, which is the thing about the universe I'm starting not to like. And so it's like, okay, I wish I was famous. Well, what's the curse attribute of being famous? It's harder to have a private life. You get way too much attention, and all that is quite stressful and can be very painful at times. And so while some people may desire fame, fame has the curse of no private life, too much attention, a lot of pressure, this, that, and the other. Anxiety, who knows? Right? So, as Deus Ex Machina, I'm going to tell you that you should not be envious of anyone. Because the universe, in its irony, will say that anything that can be perceived as a blessing will also inherently have its inverse attribute with it, which is its curse. And therefore it is balanced out. So, so, um, um, yeah. And so, you could be like, oh, let's say you're the average, you know, maybe 5.6-inch erect Caucasian male. You'd be like, oh, I wish I was endowed so I could be a male porn star who gets paid from having sex instead of like having to work intellectually and earn money and then pay for sex directly or indirectly. By directly or indirectly, I mean pay a prostitute in Nevada, or, throw money on your girlfriend, buy a ring, pay for a wedding, and pay for honeymoon traveling expenses. And so guys that are endowed are able to get paid from having sex as a male porn star, whereas guys that are not have to work intellectually and earn money and then pay for sex directly or indirectly. So, but some of the men who are male porn stars, maybe they're like, I wish I was smarter so I could do, a more respectable profession, or, be a fellow of the Royal Society or whatever. And so the whole grass is greener phenomenon, as you understand the truth that anything that could be perceived as a blessing has its inverse attribute, which is its curse, you'll understand that envy is the occupation of the weak and the unwise. Anyway, so anyway, so now I'll hit on the following point. So, in relation to sex and procreation, overpopulation. And so some people have the false notion that the world is overpopulated. Um, um, and so there's over 8 billion humans on the planet Earth. Um, um, 8 billion. So, um, um, and so you're like, 8 billion people is too many people. Well, I'm here to tell you the world's not overpopulated. Um, um, huh. And why is that the case? So if I understand correctly, America has been so prosperous that it's been wasting 40% of the food that it's been producing, while roughly 1 in 5 people in Africa are chronically hungry. And so if you do the calculus, like, okay, America's wasting 40% of the food it's producing. Around 1 in 5 African people is chronically hungry. Is that situation because the world is overpopulated? No, it's simply because of regions of prosperity versus regions of poverty. And so a prosperous region can be so prosperous that it wastes 40% of the food that it's making, and then a poor region can be so poor that one out of 5 of the people are chronically hungry. Now, if you took that 40% of food that America was wasting and shipped it to Africa, you could pretty much remove that one out of every 5 people that's chronically hungry and make things be all right. I'm not sure if that's happening, however. The world is not overpopulated. There is enough land and enough food for everyone. But the problem is greed. And so the people who don't understand this will say, oh, I don't want to have kids, the world's overpopulated. It's not. The problem is greed. So anyway. So anyway. Yeah. Um, um, so a long time ago, there was a fellow called Malthus, and his Malthusian prediction was that the population would grow to be too much for, the land on the earth to feed that many mouths. And so what Malthus did not predict was that the human brain would come up with the techniques of the agricultural revolution, and so all those complex harvesting machines, so on and so forth, with mechanical ingenuity, we effectively increased the carrying capacity of the planet Earth than what we'd previously thought. And so, ultimately, with the amount of land on the planet Earth, and all of our agricultural technology, 8 billion humans is not too much. There's enough land and there's advanced enough agricultural technology to support 8 billion humans, right? But the prosperous regions will be so prosperous that they will throw away their food, and the poor regions will be so poor that 1 in 5 of the people may be chronically hungry. So, and so I've tackled overpopulation in the context of food. But now land. And so in America there are many mansions worth millions of dollars. How many people own those properties? Very few set of people, right? And so that the duality of a small concentration of people owning $1 million worth mansions and a bunch of homeless people on the sidewalk with signs up, you have the following, again, apparently clear notion that the problem is greed. And so it's like, okay, yeah, sure, we're gonna have a world where only a very small concentration of people own $1 million worth mansions, and there's gonna be people on the sidewalk with cardboard signs up saying they're homeless or are hungry. And so all the people that think the world is overpopulated, there's enough land for housing for 8 billion people. There's enough land and agricultural technology for 8 billion people. The reason why things are messed up is because of greed. Greed for land, greed for food. Greed. And what the human gets from all that greed is nothing. As you get more and more and more, you reach higher and higher plateaus of emptiness, which is the human condition. So anyway, yeah. So there's enough land for housing, enough land and agricultural technology for food, such that the world is not fundamentally overpopulated at all. Now, what is the case is that the birth rates are below replacement. And so what that means is that, okay, you have a man and you have a woman. If the birth rate is at a replacement, then for a male-female couple, the number of offspring is 2. 2 people produce 2 more people. And so the average birth rate in many countries is below 2, which means it is below replacement. And so how this mathematically looks into the future is that although the population will continue to increase, you reach a point in which the population is skewed towards older people than younger people. The economy doesn't have that youth and vigor injected into it. And further into the future, you get population collapse if those rates stay below 2. Right? And so the whole notion is that with all this, pointless sex and getting rich off sex in the pornographic industry in evil ways and yada yada yada, right? We've fallen below replacement. And so ultimately, if in a 30-year cycle 2 humans produce 2 more humans, you have the 0-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the 60-year-olds, and the 90-year-olds. And so the 30-year-olds are the ones that are having the kids. And so 2 30-year-olds produce 2 0-year-olds. Those 0-year-olds grow to be 30. And then each of those 0-year-olds that are now 30 find another person of the opposite sex, and they produce 2 more people. And so the whole idea is that you have an ongoing sequence of 2 people making 2 more people. And so genuinely, if the birth rates everywhere across the planet Earth were 2 people make 2 more people, but not too frequently, like everyone's waiting until like their 30s to have kids, you have, okay, 2 people are going to make 2 more people. Everyone's waiting until their 30s, and then they stop after 2, and then everything would actually stay constant, right? But that level of control is a bit hard in practice because of human imperfection. But if you've seen the movie The Giver, if you try and mechanically control everything in a regulated and gray society, it becomes just that, regulated and gray. None of the imperfections that make the human experience beautiful. But mathematically, indeed, if 2 30-year-old humans made 2 0-year-old humans, and that's just how it was, and the birth rate was 2 everywhere, the population would stay at a steady state throughout the rest of time. So, anyway. So, anyway, so, um, anyway, Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. And so as I've gotten older, I've realized that the darkness of the human condition, which is that basically almost everything is subtly manipulating you. Almost everything is kind of a scam in which some entity is getting rich. And so if you are addicted to cheese post the cessation of your growing, when your body no longer needs dairy, it's because the factory keeps churning out the cheese. They have the cheese pizzas and the cheese macaroni and the cheese. And when you've stopped growing, you don't really need that much dairy. You don't really need it. Right? And so I know people who have developed skin problems because they have too much dairy and their body doesn't need that much dairy because they've stopped growing. Right? And so the factories keep on producing dairy. The human brain develops a habit loop. Says, I need to keep on eating cheese. Why? Because the texture, the taste, the I believe the salt content, there's a perfection to it, but it is entirely unnecessary, just like eating chocolate cake, just like watching pornography, just like having sex without procreation. So anyway, so anyway, um, so anyway, so um, anyway, so anyway. Uh, yeah. Even the YouTube machine learning approach, what the machine learning is doing, it is learning maximally about what you like, so it can recommend things such that you can maximize your screen time. And by maximizing your screen time, they're maximizing the amount of ads they can show to you. Many of those ads would be like something like, oh my gosh, this is the new stock that's going to be even bigger than AI, cryptocurrency, and quantum computing combined. And it's some guy talking about Amazon Helios, which is Jeff Bezos' initiative to invest in fusion energy. And you're like, can I invest in Amazon Helios? You're like, oh no, you can't invest in Amazon Helios. This is like this really private thing. And so this ad is like this scam by this, investing advisor. It's ultimately just like this scam ad, like everything else. But legitimately, you can, as an accredited investor, invest in Helion Energy, which is one of the world's foremost fusion electricity companies, that's building the world's first fusion power plant in the state of Washington. That has a deal to provide clean fusion electricity to Microsoft data centers by 2028. So they don't use a tokamak approach, which looks like a donut. Their fusion reactor looks more like a dumbbell, where it has it creates two field reversed configurations, accelerates them towards the center with a magnetic field, and then the central magnetic field compresses the FRCs until fusion occurs. And then when fusion occurs, it expands, and when it expands, it pushes back against the magnetic field, which, by Faraday's law, leads to a rate of change of magnetic flux, which generates electricity. And so the electricity in their design is directly recaptured upon the expansion of the plasma. And so ultimately, mathematically, it requires energy to create the accelerating magnetic fields and the compressing magnetic field, but the energy released from fusion is way more than the energy required to start the fusion process. And if you're only capturing if you're capturing a decent percentage of that, you get mathematically the amount of energy coming out of the reactor is more than what went in. And that's not violating conservation of energy, it's just exploiting the property of fusion. So anyway, so with this whole fusion thing, it's hard because requires energy to get it started. You don't want to be drawing less energy than required to get it started. The idea of fusion releases so much energy that it requires a some amount of energy to get it started, but once it gets going, it releases so much energy that you just need to capture a decent percentage of it. You're getting more energy out than went in. So, the law of physics says the universe conserves energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. That more energy is coming out of the reactor than went in to start the fusion reaction doesn't violate that law. It just exploits the property of fusion. So anyway, yeah. So if you're an accredited investor who's rich, and you haven't yet invested in Helion Energy, you should. So they're the only company with so aggressive of a timeline that they're promising Microsoft to deliver clean electricity from the fusion reactor by 2028. So to power Microsoft data centers. So anyway, and the fusion power plant is being built right now in the state of Washington. So, alright, so anyway, not a tokamak, a pulsed approach with field reverse configurations, and direct electricity recapture. Um, so um, so the YouTube algorithm is turning a bunch of brains into consuming zombies that are watching a ton of ads and getting dumber, and then they're getting rich off all those zombie consciousnesses. And then the evil machine learning algorithm is just turning the zombie YouTube consumer consciousnesses into slaves. And so there's people who are like filing lawsuits in relation to a thing called YouTube addiction, because the algorithm, the machine learning is literally optimized to learn what you like, recommend stuff that maximizes your screen time, so they can show you more ads and get rich off you. That's what it's doing. So people are like, I'm gonna file a lawsuit against YouTube for YouTube addiction. YouTube addiction is making me suicidal. This is happening to some people. And so the world is evil. The sooner you realize that, the better. Almost every entity is a subtly evil, manipulative scam that is getting rich off of you, or trying to get rich off of you. This is evolutionarily what is happening. So anyway, now there was an Oreo factory making Oreos, stamping them with the typical Oreo pattern, the chocolate, and of course the filling, and you just buy those Oreos, dip them in milk. Like, oh my gosh, they're great. They're not great. They contain entirely too much sugar. And then the entity that is mass producing the Oreos is getting rich off a bunch of people eating Oreos. What are the diabetes and obesity statistics in America? Horrible. Do the people who are getting rich from producing addicting, unhealthy products like Oreos care about the health of the consumers? Not necessarily. They're just getting rich. And so there's a bunch of factory-produced, mass-produced, addicting, unhealthy products that are either sweet or salty, and then people are getting rich off, the rats eating that garbage, so to speak. Right? All the clever people pretty much, buy, healthy groceries and make their own meals, or sometimes eat out at, relatively healthy restaurant locations. So anyway. So anyway. So anyway, so yeah, so anyway. Um, um, Yeah. But now we can talk about the scam that is athleticism or sports. American football players, international football players. By international football players, I mean the ones that play the game that involves it. Your feet, your head, your shoulders, your thighs. Of course, American football, they're throwing a ball around with their hands, but in international football, as per the name, they're mainly using their feet. So anyway, international football is the world's most popular sport, and so international football players make millions of dollars a year. American football players can as well make millions of dollars a year. Where is all that money coming from? Attention. When a bunch of consciousness for some reason gives their attention to something, it makes that activity valuable. Valuable to advertisers. Advertisers who can say, this event is getting attention. I want my product, service, or company to be associated with this event that is getting attention. And they pay the players and the clubs and the managers a whole ton of money because the activity receives attention. And something that receives attention is valuable because that attention can be monetized via advertising certain things to the consciousnesses watching the activity. Right? So you're like, okay, well, how does scoring goals and dribbling past players make you rich? It doesn't. It makes you rich because a lot of consciousness gives their attention to it, and then companies can sponsor the players, sponsor the clubs, and show ads, in streams of in breaks, in a stream of the match or game, and in order to broadcast that ad during that event, the players and the clubs and the managers are paid a whole lot of money because it's getting a ton of attention, right? And so the over 4,000 views on my soccer tricks clip is nothing compared to a short of a professional player in a game doing something spectacular, which might have on the order of millions of views. Not, just over 400,000. Right? Anyway. So anyway. And so if you're like, okay, why are there all these logos on the players' jerseys? It's because when, this match is being broadcast, right? The company logos on the jerseys of the players, right? The consciousnesses that are watching the soccer game are gonna, have that company's name be like subtly ingrained in their consciousness. They're like, oh wow, some jersey says Qatar Airways or Qatar Airlines on it. Now Qatar Airlines is burned into my consciousness because I was watching soccer and Qatar Airlines is on this jersey I saw, right? And so Qatar Airlines pays, the soccer club that they've chosen to sponsor a ton of money just to have their company name on the jersey of the players, because then a bunch of consciousness is going to see their company name, right? So anyway, so anyway, Anyway, so yeah. So uh, yeah. And so some time ago, Lionel Messi, right, did an ad for Pepsi, right? Pepsi is one of those evil companies mass producing and addicting unhealthy product that negatively impacts human health. That is just carbonated water, uh, sugar, and then of course a dye or food coloring. And so, Messi does this ad for Pepsi. You're like, oh, okay, I'd like to speak to Messi's nutritionist. How much Pepsi is Messi allowed to have as a professional athlete? The answer would be not that much. But meanwhile, Messi accepts a ton of money, from a sponsorship with Pepsi to do that ad, while he himself cannot have too much of that Pepsi to stay at, top athletic form to do what he does. And then, of course, drinking Pepsi negatively impacts the health of people, and diabetes and obesity, especially in America, is pretty bad. And so some people are addicted to soft drinks like Pepsi. And this addiction is in part caused or influenced by the promotion or popularity of the drink that Messi did a long time ago with this popular Messi Pepsi ad, right? And so is Messi evil? In a way, yes. This is the secret. If you think that anything on this planet is pure, everything is just a subtle scam that is trying to get rich off of you. So anyway, that can possibly be changed. And I've strayed very far away from the main theme of this video, which was sexuality. And I think I'll end the rambling here. So please subscribe to the channel. My enlightenment is unique, and I'd like to see things change.